Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to episode 33 of Buha's Block. The Lakers finally have a head coach agreeing to terms with JJ Redick on Thursday afternoon. After a nearly 7-week coaching search, the Lakers are hiring Redick on a 4-year deal in the neighborhood of $8 million per year, according to sources. And we have a story that just came out on The Athletic, along with Shams Charania and Sam Amick. So you should definitely check that out for more details on the coaching search, on the hiring of Redick, on how his interview process went, and why the Lakers ultimately landed on him. I am going to be breaking down some of those things right now, though, so let's get into it. If you've been listening to this podcast, if you've been watching my YouTube channel at all over the past few weeks, I had been saying that all the buzz since early to mid-May had been centered on JJ Redick as the leading candidate and the front runner during this process. And at first it became the slight favorite. There was some uncertainty with Ty Lue potentially becoming available depending on what happened with the Clippers position. There was also some buzz with Monty Williams potentially becoming available, and Monty Williams had been someone that the Lakers had pursued back in 2019 after they were unable to land Ty Lue. They went after Monty Williams. He ended up going to Phoenix, and then the Lakers settled on Frank Vogel, and that of course worked out, winning a championship. But Monty had been someone that they had previously had interest in. So with some uncertainty there with who exactly were going to be the candidates that were available on the market, Redick had started as a slight favorite, but then once the market started to actually shape and Monty Williams had not been fired and Ty Lue was trending toward signing an extension with the Clippers, it became clear that looking at the rest of the coaching candidates, be it James Borrego, Sam Cassell, Kenny Atkinson, Micah Nori, David Adelman, Chris Quinn, just looking at some of those names, like Redick was the strongest name from a Lakers perspective, and they viewed him as someone that could grow with the franchise. In a lot of ways, what they were looking for with Darvin Ham was someone who could help them win in the short term and shepherd the final years of the LeBron AD duo, but then also grow with the franchise in the longer term and bridge that gap into the next era of Lakers basketball and be their version of a Steve Kerr or an Eric Spoelstra. And of course, the popular name that we have reported at The Athletic that there's been some internal comparisons to Pat Riley for going from being a player to jumping to the broadcast booth to jumping to the coaching chair, all within a matter of a few years from retiring. Now, Riley did have a couple of years as an assistant under his belt before becoming a head coach. And also things were much different in the late 70s, early 80s compared to now in terms of, coaching staffs and experience and all that stuff. So it's not exactly an apples to apples comparison there, but that has been an internal name that has come up a lot, is Pat Riley. And it's not just for the way that Redick dresses or the way that he combs his hair. It's more so about being gritty and competitive and also being smart and having a level of gravitas and just showing a lot of the characteristics you want in a head coach. And the Lakers ultimately taking that gamble, making that bet on him and deciding to hire him. So now the fun begins. The Lakers have a head coach just under a week from the NBA draft. The NBA draft is, remember, on Wednesday, June 26th and Thursday, June 27th. It is now a 2-day event. First round is on Wednesday. Second round is on Thursday. Lakers and Redick will have about 6 days to plan for the first round and decide on. Remember, that's also the first day that they have access to their 3 tradable first round picks, 2024, 2029, and 2031. So the Lakers have some big decisions to make. That's the first day they can trade for a third star. It is the first day that they can trade for a starting upgrade or maybe a couple starting upgrades. Like, they can start making moves and using these picks to upgrade the roster as of Wednesday at, I believe it's midnight, it might be 12:01. But starting then, the Lakers have access to those picks and could start wheeling and dealing. But Redick is the guy, and he really was the guy for a majority of the search. There was the 5-day dalliance with Dan Hurley, and that certainly threw a bit of a wrench in things. And it was a situation that potentially could have cost the Lakers JJ Redick had he not been understanding of the pursuit of Dan Hurley. It also set a certain standard for a contract. Obviously, Redick is getting 4 years instead of the 6 years offered to Hurley, and around $8 million annually compared to the 11.5 annually offered to Hurley. So it's not the same exact contract, but it did set a certain standard there of, for a guy with that level of experience, like, this is what we're willing to give. And Redick obviously could, take that contract and then say, well, I want this and this at a minimum. Not sure for the delay. Now, one thing I had heard throughout the process was, given Redick's commitment to ESPN and calling the finals, that if he ended up being the Lakers' choice, he was not going to agree to a contract until after the finals. So this checks out with that. The finals ended on a Monday night. JJ had a couple of days to decompress, unwind, spend time with his family. And now the Lakers announce it on Thursday. We don't yet know when they will have the official press conference. Obviously, it's not going to be today, potentially on Friday, potentially on Monday, could even be on Tuesday, the day before the draft, and let JJ get settled a bit. As for potential assistant coaching candidates, the names that we've heard at The Athletic are former head coach and former Blazers assistant coach Scott Brooks, former Laker Rajon Rondo, former Laker and current Mavericks assistant coach Jared Dudley, and Sam Cassell, who is currently an assistant with the Boston Celtics, though could be in line for a promotion there, depending on what happens now that Charles Lee has taken the Charlotte Hornets job. So I don't think the Lakers are going to get all 4 of those names. Could they get a couple of those names? Certainly. That's certainly within the realm of possibility. And again, you have the ties with Rondo and Dudley to the 2020 team. They both have good relationships with LeBron James and Anthony Davis. They would have buy-in from those guys. Dudley is a beloved figure with the Mavericks, but also with the Lakers. Rondo projects as someone who has a future as a likely head coach at some point. Then Brooks would bring a certain level of experience from his days in Oklahoma City and Washington as a head coach. And Sam Cassell has been now a 15-year assistant coach after being a 15-year NBA veteran. So all those names, varying degrees of experience and whatnot, but a couple of them have ties to the Lakers, a couple of them don't, but are highly experienced assistants and or former head coaches. So those have been the names that have been floated out there. I don't see James Borrego now. Like, I'd previously reported the Lakers had interest in James Borrego being the lead assistant on JJ Redick's staff, in part because of his strong relationship with Anthony Davis, but that does not seem to be realistic at this point. Borrego is one of the finalists for the Cleveland Cavaliers job, as well as the Detroit Pistons opening, which just opened up a day ago after the Monty Williams firing. So it looks like he's going to get at least one of those 2 jobs. The Cleveland announcement should be coming relatively soon. So I think Borrego, again, whether it's that or Detroit, Borrego will likely be a head coach next year, or if not, and if he chooses to stay in New Orleans, then I think he will be a leading candidate for the next head coaching cycle. So Borrego seems like he's not going to be on the Lakers staff. That is one thing that we can say in terms of what the staff will look like. But as far as the other 4 names, it's TBD. As for what we know about JJ and his coaching philosophies, according to multiple sources, he was, quote, impressive during the interview process. Only Redick, Dan Hurley, and James Borrego got in-person interviews. Everyone else, Sam Cassell, Mike Nori, David Adelman, Chris Quinn, those are all remote interviews with Rob Pelinka. But according to sources, Redick was incredibly impressive with his personality. I heard that he was electric in the interviews, but was also incredibly impressive with his problem-solving skills of how he would handle conversations with players, different X's and O's matters, including how he could get the ball to Anthony Davis more consistently in fourth quarters and crunch times, running the offense a bit more through Anthony Davis, taking the load off of LeBron James, finding different 3-man actions for Austin Reeves, LeBron James, and Anthony Davis. The Lakers have really been pumping up Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura, and Max Christie as 3 young pieces of their foundation, and how JJ Redick would handle those guys. So they were really impressed with how he answered a lot of these questions and a lot of these different problems that they threw at him. He really showed them that he's committed to helping them compete in the short term, but also building out a program, building out a culture longer term. We knew JJ was going to interview well. We know like he's got the personality, he's got the charisma, he's got the charm. We've seen it on TV, we've seen it on his podcast. So that wasn't necessarily a surprise, but I heard it wasn't just the personality. Like the personality was certainly a thing, and it was a differentiating factor between him and most of the candidates. But it wasn't just that. It was his preparation, it was his level of detail, and it was the thoroughness of just being able to walk through different scenarios and have multiple layers of answers and solutions for various hypotheticals. So JJ checked all the boxes for the Lakers as a young coach who is smart, he's analytically driven, he's open-minded. He's not tied to a coaching tree or a coaching philosophy. He's not someone who's going to come in with preconceived notions of we need to do X or we need to do Y. He's coming in with a very collaborative mindset. And this is something that he's been preparing for weeks. I reported this a couple weeks ago, right before the Dan Hurley situation, that I've been told Redick has been working behind the scenes on this for a while in terms of getting ready for coaching interviews, coaching opportunities, and consulting with different people around the league in terms of the best ways to use Anthony Davis and LeBron James, the best ways to connect with those guys. And obviously he's got a connection with LeBron from the podcast, and we can't overlook that, although all indications have been that LeBron has been hands-off during this process. He has not backed JJ. He has stayed out of it. But that relationship aside, like it's a difference between being a podcast co-host with LeBron James and actually coaching LeBron James and getting him to buy in. So JJ has been doing his homework. He's been doing his preparation of different two-man actions with those guys, different ways to run the offense, different ways to run the defense. And I think one of the things that really stood out was his preparation and just his thoroughness, his attention to detail, and his ability to communicate that at a very high level. So the Lakers are excited about his potential in terms of how he is going to change things schematically, but also how he's going to communicate with players, how he's going to command the locker room. And look, there's obviously a measure of risk here. It is a gamble by the Lakers on a first-time head coach. There's a chance that this does not work out for the final year or 2 years or 3 years of the LeBron AD partnership. There's a chance this is a disaster, and there's a chance that the Lakers are looking for a head coach in a couple years or maybe 3 years, and this situation just doesn't work out. But looking at the alternatives, I think you can make a compelling case for JJ Redick. I think he does profile as someone who is going to be a very good head coach sooner than later. I'm sure there will be some level of growing pains, and it's going to be important that the Lakers round out the staff with the right types of pieces to empower him, to help him learn, and to correct and to address some of his potential shortcomings. But if the Lakers can do that and get a more experienced staff and get a couple of former head coaches on the staff, get maybe a more player liaison type, kind of like the Dudley or even a Rondo, who's going to fill that like Phil Handy role of making sure that the players and the coaching staff are always on the same page or as close to it as possible, then I think there's a chance here for this to be successful. And I look at this as like longer term. I think JJ is going to be a good coach in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Like I don't have doubts about that. I think there will be a learning curve in year one, especially the first few months as he starts to figure things out. But he is such a smart guy and he is such a good communicator that I think that can sometimes be half the battle. Is how are you communicating? Like basketball is basketball, and we can dive into the X's and O's and strategy and all these different things. And those are all very important. But sometimes it comes down to how are you delivering the message? Are you delivering it clearly? Are you delivering it in a way where your players understand it? They can understand where you're coming from in terms of some of the rotational decisions you have to make, or in terms of putting a player maybe in a position that they're not comfortable with or they're not accustomed to. So like the messaging is very important at the NBA level. And that's often where like we will see certain coaches are brilliant from an X's and O's perspective, but they can't communicate it well, or they can't maintain buy-in with their players. And the Lakers are looking at those two aspects of communication with the players and maintaining buy-in as two strengths for JJ Redick from day one. And then there's the matter of the managerial aspects, and that is going to be him learning on the fly, like challenges and managing your timeouts and managing a rotation and all those things. Like, you can prep for it, but it's different once you're thrown into the fire, right? So there's going to be some level of learning and adjusting on the fly with JJ Redick. And I'm sure whenever he has his opening press conference, he will acknowledge that. But I think there are a lot of things that on paper he checks in terms of positives. There is a gamble. There is a mystery box element to this. And there are certain things we just won't know the answer to until he starts coaching in training camp in the preseason. But I am optimistic on this. I know he's been a very polarizing and divisive coach. I know a lot of Laker fans got their hopes up with the Dan Hurley situation, and ending up with JJ is going to be a bit of a disappointment. But I think JJ has as strong of a resume as is possible, really, for a candidate that is not coached at the professional level, that is only coached at the youth level. And I know that kind of sounds crazy. I know that sounds like, I understand there are going to be a bunch of people who are skeptical of this. A bunch of people don't like this move, and I get it. That's totally reasonable. But in my opinion, I think that when looking at, this was not a great coaching pool. There's not a lot of great coaching candidates. I understand there were some assistant coaches like a Micah Nori or David Adelman who on paper also checked a lot of boxes. Clearly from a gravitas perspective, like maybe those guys weren't as charming or charismatic or didn't have the type of personality or command that Redick portrayed in his interviews. So I don't know if that was I've not gotten as much clarity on those guys and why they ultimately weren't given a stronger look compared to a Cassell or a Borrego. But we're here now. The Lakers have hired JJ Redick. He is the coach. The search is finally over. I was a little concerned it was going to go into week 8 and start to bleed into the NBA draft, but the Lakers have their head coach less than a week before the draft. It's better late than never. For me, this has been one of the craziest stories I have covered, arguably the craziest story I've covered in my time covering the NBA. Just the twists and turns, the Dan Hurley surprise, and that potentially derailing their JJ Redick pursuit. I mean, then the whole thing with the offer and what was real and what wasn't, and just like so many things with that. And just, was it a smoke screen, or how did JJ, just so many variables all over the place, so many things that didn't pass the smell test. But from the beginning, I had heard JJ Redick is the name to watch. It is JJ Redick's competition to lose. That ended up being true, aside from, again, this 5-day situation with Dan Hurley. But JJ Redick is the Lakers' next head coach. He is the 7th coach since Phil Jackson in 2011. He's the 29th coach in franchise history, and the Lakers are going to have him for the next few years, including the end of the LeBron AD era. So the JJ Redick era is officially underway. That will do it for today's episode. Wanted to give you a quick breakdown of our story and my thoughts on it. We'll have more in the coming days, especially after we get a chance to talk to JJ Redick. Maybe he'll be a future podcast guest on this very show. I would love to make that happen. But thank you guys so much again for watching and listening. I'll be back on Friday actually with another draft episode with Mike Garcia of LakersDraft.substack, at Canyon Driver on Twitter, one of the smartest people covering the Lakers and the draft. So I'll have a draft episode tomorrow. Ended up having to push that. We recorded it today, but we're pushing it to tomorrow because of today's news. So thank you guys again. For those on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and drop a comment and a like if you enjoyed this video. For those on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and your podcast platform of choice, make sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back tomorrow with the draft episode, and then next week with a follow-up off of JJ's press conference. I will talk to you soon.